Chapter 1. The Flavor of Progress. In the gleaming metropolis of New York, where the buildings were so tall they needed oxygen masks, progress came in little silver packets. It was widely agreed that humanity had finally solved the pesky problem of food. Gone were the days of worrying about droughts, locusts, or whether your tomatoes would ripen before the first frost. In fact, gone were tomatoes altogether. And frost. And locusts, though nobody was complaining about that last one. The year was 2224, and humanity had proudly stepped into an era where dinner was a mathematical equation and lunch was a color-coded series of pills. Breakfast, being the most important meal of the day, came in the form of a mist that you walked through on your way to work. At the heart of this nutritional revolution was the MegaCorpo Food Replacement Corporation, whose slogan, "Eat smart, not hard," was plastered across every surface that wasn't already covered in chrome or digital advertisements for the latest mood-enhancing nasal spray. In the pristine kitchen of her 457th floor apartment, Luna Novak was preparing for her morning meal. She opened her Nutri-Cabinet, a sleek device that looked like a cross between a microwave and a small particle accelerator. "Good morning, Luna," the cabinet chirped in a voice that sounded like it had been designed by a committee who had only ever heard happiness described secondhand. "What fueling experience would you like today?" Luna sighed. She was feeling adventurous. "Surprise me," she said, immediately regretting her decision. The Nutri-Cabinet whirred and beeped, its internal mechanisms reconfiguring molecules with the enthusiasm of a toddler playing with building blocks. After precisely 17 seconds, food preparation taking any longer was considered a sign of societal regression. A small tray slid out. On it sat 3 items. A pill the color of a sunset on a polluted beach. A cube that somehow looked both translucent and opaque. And a small vial of liquid that seemed to be arguing with the laws of physics. "Today's breakfast," announced the cabinet with digital pride, "is a nostalgic sunrise vitamin complex, a quantum nutrition cube with the essence of everything, and a Schrödinger smoothie that is simultaneously every flavor and no flavor at all. Enjoy your meal." Luna looked at her breakfast. Her breakfast looked back at her. She had a sneaking suspicion that the cube was judging her. As she contemplated the meaning of essence of everything, did that include that one terrible date she had in college? Her wall screen flickered to life, displaying the morning news. "This is Barbara Newsbot, bringing you the latest in gastronomic technology," said a woman whose hair seemed to defy not just gravity, but several other fundamental forces of nature. MegaCorpo has announced a breakthrough in flavor simulation. Their new line of Synthi meals will now taste almost, but not entirely, unlike the food they're named after. The screen flashed to a man in a lab coat so white it made fresh snow look grimy. "We're very excited," he said with all the excitement of a sloth on sedatives. "Our new classic comfort line will allow people to experience flavors reminiscent of ancient foods. Imagine tasting something almost, but not quite entirely unlike chicken." Luna popped the sunset pill into her mouth. It tasted of broken promises and misplaced nostalgia. As she sipped Schrödinger smoothie, which somehow left her both satisfied and hungry, Luna gazed out of her window at the cityscape. The buildings stretched into the smog, their tops lost in a haze that was equal parts pollution and hubris. Somewhere in the distant past, there had been things called trees and grass, but such archaic concepts had no place in the chrome and neon future of New York. Little did Luna know that 426 floors below her, past the foundations of the megascrapers and deep underground, something green was stirring. But that, as they say, is a story for another meal. Chapter 2. The Underground Rebellion. Ariel Greenleaf was a rebel, not the kind that wore leather jackets and rode motorcycles, though she did own a particularly rebellious pair of gardening gloves, but the kind that dared to believe that food should have roots rather than barcodes. In a world where progress was measured by how far you could get from nature without actually leaving the planet, Ariel had decided to get as close to it as possible. This involved going underground, both literally and metaphorically. Her fingers danced across a control panel with all the grace of a drunken spider attempting the tarantella. The wall of her micro-apartment, so small that you had to go outside to change your mind, slid open with a hiss that sounded suspiciously like it was saying, "You really shouldn't be doing this, you know." Ariel stepped into the hidden elevator, followed by her cat, Whiskers. Whiskers was the kind of cat that made you wonder if evolution had some particularly sarcastic days. "Ready for another day of flagrant disregard for nutritional legislation?" Ariel asked. Whiskers responded with a look that suggested he had not only contemplated the question deeply, but had also formulated a comprehensive economic policy in response. The elevator descended, passing layers of forgotten infrastructure, lost socks, and the fossilized remains of common sense. Finally, it opened into a cavern that nature had clearly designed while in a particularly exuberant mood. Before them stretched row upon row of plants that had no business existing in this century. Tomatoes hung like rubies, if rubies had the good sense to be edible and make excellent sauce. Leafy greens swayed gently in artificial breezes, practicing their photosynthesis with the dedication of concert pianists. Overhead, a lighting system mimicked sunlight with all the earnestness of a child pretending to be an adult. It even produced the occasional artificial cloud, which would drift by and rain on only the plants that had been particularly good that week. Ariel walked down an earthen path, the sound of soil crunching beneath her feet like a percussive rebellion against the antiseptic hum of the world above. She approached a small greenhouse which sat in the cavern with the air of something trying very hard not to be noticed. Inside, seedlings of supposedly extinct vegetables were taking their first tentative steps towards existence. They looked around with their leafy appendages as if to say, "Are you sure it's safe to come out? We've heard some rather disturbing things about the last few centuries." A bumblebee buzzed past, looking inordinately pleased with itself for mastering the art of flight, despite supposedly not knowing it was impossible. It was one of thousands in Ariel's carefully cultivated colony, each insect an unwitting foot soldier in her pollination army. As Ariel tended to her plants, her mind wandered to the world above, where people consumed meals that were engineered with the precision of spacecraft and the flavor of particularly unambitious cardboard. Her reverie was interrupted by a chorus of bleats and clucks. Near the back of the cavern, hidden behind a copse of dwarf fruit trees, which were rather sensitive about their height, a herd of miniature goats and a flock of hens regarded her with the sort of expectant look usually reserved for messiahs or pizza delivery persons. "Yes, yes, I see you," Ariel called out. "Your Oscar-worthy performance as animals who haven't been fed in years is noted." As she made her way towards her four-legged and feathered conspirators, Ariel's hand brushed against a bookshelf that lurked in an alcove, trying to blend in with the stalactites. It was filled with cookbooks, each one a paper revolutionary in a world that had decided flavor was best left to the imagination. She pulled out a volume, its pages falling open to a recipe for ratatouille. The ingredients list read like a roll call of outlawed substances. Ariel could almost taste the flavors. A symphony that MegaCorpo's flavor scientists could only dream of, if dreaming hadn't been outlawed as an inefficient use of sleep time. Replacing the book, Ariel felt the cavern tremble slightly. Above, another space shuttle was launching, carrying Earth's inhabitants to colonies where they hoped to find a better life among the stars. If only they knew, Ariel mused, reaching down to scratch Whiskers, who had reappeared with the stealth of a furry ninja. The real final frontier isn't up there. It's right here, under their feet. With the determination of someone who had decided to take on the entire concept of progress, armed with nothing but a trowel and a recipe for organic compost, Ariel turned back to her tasks. There were seeds to plant, each one a tiny act of rebellion. There was mulch to spread, like a revolutionary distributing leaflets, if leaflets were made of decomposed leaves and smelled vaguely of possibility. In her secret garden, hope grew alongside the vegetables and fruits. It was a promise of a future where humanity might remember that real food doesn't come with a software update. Little did Ariel know that her carefully guarded secret was about to collide head-on with the world above, with all the grace of a tomato thrown at a MegaCorpo board meeting. Chapter 3. Luna's Discovery and the Blunder. Luna Novak was having a particularly bad day, which in the world of New Neo York meant her mood stabilizer patch was malfunctioning. She'd tried to report the issue to MegaCorpo's customer service, but after spending an hour talking to a chatbot that seemed to think she was complaining about a defective toaster, she'd given up and decided to take a walk instead. This, as it turned out, was her first mistake. The second was tripping over a cat that appeared out of nowhere, looking smug in the way that only cats can when they've successfully caused a human to lose their dignity. Luna tumbled head over heels, her fall broken by what she initially thought was a particularly soft piece of pavement. It wasn't until she sat up, spitting out something that tasted suspiciously, unlike the sanitized air she was used to, that she realized she'd fallen through a perfectly camouflaged trapdoor. "Well," said a voice that sounded like it was trying very hard not to laugh, "I suppose the cat's out of the bag, or rather the human's in the hole." Luna looked up to see a woman with dirt smudged on her cheek and leaves in her hair, looking for all the world like Mother Nature's eccentric cousin. Next to her sat the cat, wearing an expression that suggested it had planned this all along. "I'm Ariel," said the woman, offering a hand, "and this is Whiskers, the feline welcoming committee." Luna took the offered hand, her eyes slowly adjusting to the dim light. As they did, she began to make out shapes around her. Green shapes, living shapes. The kind of shapes that weren't supposed to exist outside of historical simulations and particularly vivid dreams. "Is this—" Luna's voice trailed off, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. "A farm?" Ariel finished for her. "An illegal underground oasis of biodiversity and culinary rebellion? A giant middle finger to MegaCorpo's nutritional dystopia? Yes, yes, and, emphatically, yes." Luna's jaw dropped, which Whiskers seemed to take as an invitation to investigate whether she'd recently eaten any mice. Finding no evidence of rodents, the cat settled for giving her shoe a disdainful sniff. But food comes from factories," Luna stammered, parroting the slogan she'd seen on every Nutri-dispenser since childhood. Ariel's laugh was warm and rich like soil after rain. "Oh, my dear, let me show you what food really is." What followed was a whirlwind tour that made Luna's head spin more than any VR experience ever had. Ariel led her past rows of tomatoes that blushed deeper than a teenager's first crush. Lettuce leaves so green they made emeralds look washed out, and herbs that filled the air with fragrances no synthetic air freshener could hope to mimic. "And this," said Ariel, presenting Luna with a small red fruit, "is a strawberry." Luna looked at it suspiciously. "Doesn't look much like the Strawberry Blast flavor pellets." "That's because it's not trying to blast your taste buds into submission," Ariel replied. "Go on, try it." Luna hesitantly took a bite. Her eyes widened as flavors exploded across her tongue, sweet and tart, and indescribably real. It was like tasting color for the first time after a lifetime of grayscale. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh, wow." Ariel beamed. "Welcome to real food, Luna. Welcome to life. The next few hours were a blur of tastes and smells. Luna tried crisp apples that crunched satisfyingly, sweet carrots pulled fresh from the earth, and bread that Ariel baked in a small underground oven, filling the cavern with a scent that made Luna's stomach growl in a way her nutrient pills never had. As they sat down to a meal that Ariel called a salad, which, to Luna's amazement, didn't come in a pill form, Luna's mind was reeling. "This is amazing," she said between mouthfuls. "I can't believe this has been here all along. Everyone needs to know about this." Ariel's smile faltered. "Luna, you can't tell anyone. This farm is illegal. If MegaCorpo found out..." But Luna was only half listening, her mind racing with possibilities. "My best friend Pixel would love this, and my co-workers at the virtual pet company. They're always complaining about the blandness of our lunch cubes." Whiskers, who had been lounging nearby, suddenly sat up straight, his ears twitching in alarm. But it was too late. In her excitement, Luna had already pulled out her communicuff, her fingers flying over the holographic keys. "Pixel, you won't believe what I've found. There's this amazing underground farm with real food and..." Ariel lunged for the communicuff, but the message had already been sent. The damage was done. As alarms began to blare and red lights flashed throughout the cavern, Ariel looked at Luna with a mixture of disappointment and resignation. "Well," she sighed, "I suppose we're in a bit of a pickle, and not the delicious homemade kind." Whiskers, displaying the impeccable timing that only cats possess, chose that moment to knock over a basket of actual pickles, as if to emphasize the point. As the sound of approaching sirens filtered down from the world above, Luna realized that her bad day had just gotten exponentially worse. But as she looked at the vibrant life around her, the plants that defied everything she'd been taught about food and nature, she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer hungry for the first time in her life. Chapter 4. The Threat of Closure. The sirens grew louder, their wail reminiscent of a Nutri-Smoothie machine trying to blend a particularly stubborn cube of synthetic protein. Ariel's mind raced faster than Whiskers, chasing a genetically modified mouse, a failed MegaCorpo experiment that had escaped and developed a taste for shoelaces. "Right," Ariel said, clapping her soil-stained hands together. "Time to execute emergency protocol zucchini." Luna blinked. "Emergency protocol what now?" "Zucchini," Ariel repeated as if it were the most natural thing in the world, because like zucchinis in a thriving garden, it tends to pop up more often than you'd expect. With practiced ease, Ariel began rushing around the cavern, pulling levers, pushing buttons, and occasionally whispering encouragingly to plants. Luna watched in bewilderment as entire sections of the farm seemed to fold in on themselves, disappearing into the walls and floor. "Don't just stand there gawping like a malfunctioning Vita drone," Ariel called out. "Start hiding the evidence. And for the love of all that's green, don't eat any more strawberries. Your lips are stained redder than a tomato with a sunburn." Luna snapped into action, though she wasn't entirely sure what constituted evidence in this situation. She settled for scooping up fallen leaves and stuffing them into her pockets, which she realized too late was probably not the most effective method of disposal. Whiskers, meanwhile, had taken it upon himself to help by systematically knocking over every potted plant within reach. Whether this was an attempt at camouflage or simply feline sabotage was anyone's guess. Just as the last visible sign of vegetation disappeared behind a panel that looked suspiciously like it was made of recycled Nutri-Wrapper packets, the cavern was flooded with light. A squad of MegaCorpo nutrition enforcement officers poured in, their uniforms so crisp they could have doubled as fiber supplements. At their head was a man whose mustache seemed to have aspirations of becoming a small, angry ferret. His badge identified him as Inspector Flavorban, and his expression suggested he had just sucked on a particularly sour, lemon-flavoured Nutripill. "Well, well, well," he said in the tone of someone who had practiced saying well 3 times in front of a mirror. "What do we have here? An illegal cultivation operation, perhaps? A hotbed of unregulated nutrient production?" Ariel stepped forward, the picture of innocence despite the leaf stuck in her hair. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Inspector. This is simply my underground hobby room for, collecting vintage NutriCube wrappers. Very fascinating history, you know." Flavorban's eyes narrowed. "Is that so? And I suppose that earthy smell is just a new aroma boost capsule? Essence of dirt, perhaps?" "Oh no," Ariel said quickly. "That's just my cat's litter box, isn't it, Whiskers?" Whiskers, who had been in the process of shredding what looked suspiciously like a zucchini leaf, paused to give Ariel a look that clearly said, "Don't drag me into this, human." Luna, feeling she should contribute something, blurted out, "It's true. We were just discussing the fascinating history of synthetic nutrition. Did you know that the first NutriCube was actually cube-shaped? Revolutionary." Flavorban's moustache twitched, as if it were trying to sniff out deceit. "Uh-huh. And I suppose you won't mind if we take a look around, then?" "Be my guest," Ariel said with a wave of her hand that she hoped looked nonchalant rather than terrified. What followed was the most nerve-wracking game of hide-and-seek since the great vitamin C shortage of 2180. The officers poked and prodded at every surface, their scanner specs searching for any trace of illicit chlorophyll. Luna watched in a mix of awe and terror as Ariel smooth-talked her way through increasingly bizarre explanations. A stray tomato seed became a vintage novelty pill. A patch of soil was dismissed as artisanal exfoliant, and a forgotten sprig of basil was hurriedly eaten by Ariel, who then had to pretend she wasn't thoroughly enjoying the burst of flavour. Just when it seemed they might actually pull it off, disaster struck in the form of a renegade sprout. A tiny seedling, apparently possessing both impeccable timing and a suicidal streak, chose that moment to push its way through a crack in the floor, right at Inspector Flavorban's feet. The cavern fell silent. Even Whiskers paused mid-groom to watch the unfolding drama. Flavorban bent down, his scanner specs zooming in on the tiny green shoot. "Well, well, well," he said again, apparently stuck in a loop. "What do we have here? Looks like someone's been a naughty, naughty gardener." Ariel's shoulders slumped. The jig, it seemed, was up. Luna felt tears prick her eyes, the weight of her role in this disaster hitting her like a malfunctioning meal mist dispenser. But just as Flavorban was reaching for his regulation enforcer, a device that looked disturbingly like a souped-up weed whacker, a new voice cut through the tension. "I wouldn't touch that if I were you, Inspector, unless you want to be responsible for destroying evidence in a top-secret MegaCorpo experiment, that is." All heads turned to see an elderly man standing at the entrance to the cavern, his lab coat so white it made the nutrition enforcement officers' uniforms look dingy in comparison. Ariel's eyes widened in recognition. "Doctor. Zephyr," she breathed, a glimmer of hope sparking in her eyes. As Flavorban sputtered in confusion, Dr. Zephyr strode forward, his air of authority causing the officers to part before him like a sea of artificially flavoured gelatin. "This," he announced, gesturing grandly around the cavern, "is the site of Project Green Revival. Top secret need-to-know basis only. And I'm afraid, Inspector, you don't need to know." As Flavorban's moustache performed gymnastics of indignation, Dr. Zephyr turned to Ariel with a wink. "Isn't that right, lead researcher Greenleaf?" Ariel, catching on quickly, straightened up and adopted her most official tone. "Absolutely, Doctor. Zephyr, we were just, testing the effects of unauthorized discovery on the project's integrity. Very important data." Luna, not to be left out, chimed in. "And I'm the, test subject. For measuring public reaction. Spoiler alert, I'm very reactive. Whiskers, sensing the change in the wind, sauntered over to Flavorban and began weaving between his legs, leaving a trail of cat hair on his impeccable uniform. For a moment it seemed as though Flavorban might argue, but faced with the combined forces of Zephyr's authority, Ariel's quick thinking, Luna's enthusiastic nodding, and Whisker's determined assault on the cleanliness of his pants, he finally deflated. "Well, if this is official MegaCorpo business," he muttered, his moustache drooping in defeat. As the Nutrition Enforcement Squad filed out, thoroughly confused and slightly covered in cat hair, Ariel, Luna, and Dr. Zephyr shared a look of relief. The farm was safe for now. But as the sound of the officers' retreating footsteps faded, Ariel knew that this was only the beginning. The secret was out, and it was only a matter of time before MegaCorpo came sniffing around again. She looked at Dr. Zephyr, her eyes full of questions. The old scientist simply smiled and said, "I think, my dear, it's time we had a chat about the future of food. But first, might I trouble you for a cup of that marvellous mint tea I smell? I've developed quite a distaste for Nutrisips lately." As Ariel bustled about preparing the tea, Luna slumped against a newly re-emerged planter box, her heart still racing. That, she declared to no one in particular, was more exciting than the time my reality lenses glitched and convinced me I was a sentient NutriCube for a day. Whiskers, having completed his mission of thoroughly de-sterilizing the cavern, curled up on Luna's lap with a satisfied purr. The cat's expression seemed to say, "Amateur. I caused this much chaos before breakfast." And so, crisis averted, for now, the unlikely group settled in for a conversation that would change the course of their world's culinary future. But first, there would be tea. Real tea. And maybe, Ariel thought with a smile, a slice of zucchini bread. After all, they had a lot of zucchini to use up. Chapter 5. The Unexpected Hero. In the wake of the Great Vegetable Inquisition, as Luna had dubbed it, life in Ariel's underground Eden took on a new sense of urgency. Dr. Zephyr had become a frequent visitor, his lab coat collecting soil stains faster than a Nutrivac collected dust bunnies. "We need a plan," Ariel declared one day, pacing back and forth between rows of anxious-looking lettuce. "MegaCorpo won't be fooled forever by our top-secret experiment ruse." Luna, who had taken to spending most of her free time in the underground farm, much to the confusion of her virtual pet co-workers, nodded vigorously. "Maybe we could disguise everything as an avant-garde art installation. The greening of nostalgia, a multi-sensory experience." Dr. Zephyr stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Creative. But I'm not sure Inspector Flavorban struck me as the artistic type, unless you count his moustache, which was certainly expressive." Whiskers sprawled across a sunbeam from one of Ariel's ingenious light pipes, opened one eye as if to say, "Wake me when you humans figure out something useful." Just then, a series of rapid beeps echoed through the cavern. Ariel's eyes widened. "Someone's at the secret entrance." They all froze. Even the plants seemed to hold their chlorophyll-laden breath. Then, to everyone's surprise, Whiskers leapt up and trotted towards the hidden elevator, tail held high like a furry periscope. "Traitor!" Ariel hissed, but the cat paid her no mind. The elevator doors slid open with a hiss that sounded suspiciously like, "Here we go again," and out stepped a walking nutrition label. The newcomer was dressed head to toe in the sleek silver uniform of a MegaCorpo nutritional compliance officer. His helmet was shaped like a giant NutriCube, complete with a digital readout that currently displayed confusion, 78%. Luna yelped and dove behind a large pumpkin, Dr. Zephyr fumbled for a nearby watering can, brandishing it like a weapon. Ariel, however, simply crossed her arms and fixed the intruder with a stare that could have wilted a synthetic salad. "Well," she said, channeling her inner flavor ban, "what do we have here?" The NutriCube head swiveled towards her, its digital display now reading awkwardness 95%. Then, with movements that suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable in his own skin, or synthetic fiber suit, the figure reached up and removed his helmet. Beneath was the face of a young man, his eyes wide with wonder as he took in the green paradise around him. I'm Max," he stammered. "Max Flavor, Junior Nutritional Compliance Officer, and I think I'm having an existential crisis." Ariel raised an eyebrow. "An existential crisis, you say? Well, you've come to the right place. We specialize in those here, along with heirloom tomatoes and rebellion against culinary oppression." Max's gaze darted around the cavern, taking in the riot of colors and scents, so at odds with the sterile world he knew. "I've been following the clues," he said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "Anomalies in the nutritional matrix, unexplained spikes in atmospheric oxygen levels. And then I saw Inspector Flavorban's report. It all led here to a top-secret MegaCorpo experiment," Dr. Zephyr supplied smoothly. "Nothing to concern yourself with, young man. Why don't you turn around and—" "No!" Max exclaimed with such vehemence that even Whiskers looked impressed. "This isn't a MegaCorpo experiment. This is real food, isn't it? The kind they tell us is extinct." Luna, emerging from behind her pumpkin fortress, couldn't help but giggle. "Oh, it's real, all right. Real and really delicious. Want to try a carrot?" Before anyone could stop her, she plucked a vibrant orange carrot from a nearby basket and held it out to Max. He stared at it as if she were offering him the keys to the universe. With trembling hands, he took the carrot and, after a moment's hesitation, bit into it. The crunch echoed through the cavern like a thunderclap. Max's eyes widened, his NutriCube helmet's display flashing "Flavor Overload 200%, before shorting out completely. "Oh," he breathed. "Oh, wow." Ariel and Dr. Zephyr exchanged glances. This was not how they had expected their day to go. "So," Ariel said cautiously, "I don't suppose we can convince you this is all a vivid hallucination brought on by a faulty Nutri-Patch?" Max shook his head, still staring at the half-eaten carrot in his hand. "All my life I felt like something was missing, like the world was incomplete somehow. And now I know why." He looked up, his eyes shining with a mix of tears and determination. "You're growing real food. Food that doesn't come from a factory or a lab. Food that's alive." Dr. Zephyr stepped forward, his scientific curiosity piqued. "You seem to know an awful lot about pre-synthetic nutrition for a MegaCorpo employee." Max flushed. "I may have spent a lot of time in the restricted section of the MegaCorpo archives. Did you know they keep actual physical books there, with pages made from trees?" Luna gasped. "You mean like Ariel's cookbooks?" "Luna!" Ariel hissed, but the damage was done. Max's eyes lit up. "You have cookbooks? Real ones? With recipes for all of this?" He gestured around the cavern. Ariel sighed, shooting a glare at Luna that promised revenge in the form of compost duty. "Yes, we have cookbooks, and yes, we use them to cook real food, which is, as you've probably guessed, highly illegal and definitely not a MegaCorpo-sanctioned activity." For a moment, tension hung in the air thicker than the paste that passed for hearty stew substitute number 5 in the world above. Then, to everyone's surprise, Max straightened up and said, "I want to help." Ariel blinked. "You... what?" "I want to help," Max repeated more firmly this time. This is important. More important than nutritional compliance or synthetic flavor profiles or anything MegaCorpo has ever taught me." Dr. Zephyr stroked his beard thoughtfully. "And how exactly do you propose to help, young man?" Max's face broke into a grin that would have sent the MegaCorpo marketing department into fits of jealousy. Well, for starters, I have access to shipping manifests, distribution schedules, and security patrol routes. Oh, and I'm pretty good with computers. I once reprogrammed a Nutri-dispenser to play old video games. Luna clapped her hands in delight. Oh, he's perfect. Can we keep him? Please. Ariel looked from Max's eager face to Dr. Zephyr's thoughtful one, to Luna's pleading eyes, and finally to Whiskers, who had settled himself on Max's boot and was purring contentedly. Well, she said at last, a slow smile spreading across her face, I suppose every revolution needs a man on the inside. Welcome aboard, Max Flavor, undercover agent of agriculture. And so, in a hidden cavern beneath the sterile streets of New Neo York, an unlikely alliance was formed. A renegade gardener, a reformed corporate drone, an enthusiastic youngster, an elderly scientist, and a cat with a penchant for chaos. All united in their quest to bring real food back to a world that had forgotten the taste of nature. As they gathered around a table laden with a feast that would have made MegaCorpo's flavor engineers weep with envy, Ariel couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance to change the world, one illegal vegetable at a time. Max, still looking slightly dazed but undeniably happy, raised a glass of fresh-squeezed orange juice, a beverage that had nearly short-circuited his NutriCube helmet when he first saw it being made. To real food, he said solemnly. To real food, the others echoed, even Whiskers contributing a meow to the toast. And as they clinked their glasses together, the sound resonating through the underground haven, it seemed to carry with it the promise of a future where the world above might once again know the simple joy of a sun-ripened tomato, the crunch of a fresh apple, and the incomparable taste of food grown with love and just a touch of rebellious spirit. Chapter 6. Seeds of Rebellion. The weeks following Max's recruitment into the underground gourmets, as Luna had enthusiastically dubbed their group, were a whirlwind of activity. The once quiet cavern now buzzed with the energy of a hive of particularly ambitious bees, if bees were interested in overthrowing the nutritional status quo. Max, true to his word, had proven to be an invaluable asset. His MegaCorpo access codes opened digital doors faster than Whiskers could knock over a carefully arranged herb planter. You won't believe this, Max announced one day, his eyes gleaming with the fervor of a man who'd just discovered that his entire life was based on a nutritionally empty lie. I've found a network of old, abandoned subway tunnels. They crisscross the entire city. Ariel's eyes lit up like a child who'd just been told that vegetables could taste good. Do you know what this means? We could expand our operation, create a whole network of underground farms. Dr. Zephyr stroked his beard thoughtfully, a habit that had led to several awkward moments when stray herb leaves got caught in it. It's risky, but the potential benefits are enormous. We could grow enough food to feed hundreds, maybe thousands. Luna, who had been attempting to teach Whiskers the finer points of seed sorting, an endeavour that was going about as well as one might expect when trying to educate a creature whose main interests were napping and chaos, piped up. Ooh, we could be like Robin Hood, but instead of stealing from the rich, we're stealing, dirt and giving delicious veggies to the poor. Technically, Max pointed out, we'd be stealing from MegaCorpo. Those tunnels are probably still their property. Ariel waved a hand dismissively. MegaCorpo stole the concept of flavour from the entire world. I think we're justified in reclaiming a few dusty old tunnels. And so, Operation Tunnel Vision, Luna's naming skills were, if nothing else, consistent, was born. Over the next few days, the group worked tirelessly to extend their agricultural rebellion into the forgotten underbelly of New Neo York. Max's technical skills came in handy as they rigged up lighting systems that would have made most nightclubs jealous. Dr. Zephyr's scientific knowledge was invaluable in creating the perfect growing conditions in the less-than-ideal environment. Luna's enthusiasm and seemingly boundless energy kept everyone's spirits high, even when they were knee-deep in century-old subway muck. Ariel, for her part, felt like a general leading a very peculiar army. An army armed with trowels and seed packets, waging war against bland nutrition and corporate control one sprouted bean at a time. Whiskers, naturally, supervised the entire operation with feline disdain, occasionally deigning to chase away a startled rat or two. As their underground network grew, so did their circle of allies. Luna, unable to contain her excitement, had let slip to a few trusted friends about the super-secret vegetable speakeasy, her words much to Ariel's chagrin. Soon a small but devoted group of real food enthusiasts was forming. There was Pixel, Luna's best friend and a disillusioned virtual pet designer, who turned out to have a knack for creating camouflage systems for their illicit crops. If I can make a digital cat look realistic, I can certainly make a tomato plant look like a malfunctioning Nutri-dispenser, she declared. Then there was Herb, yes, really, a retired MegaCorpo flavorist who had always secretly despised the artificial tastes he created. His knowledge of chemical compounds, intended for crafting new synthetic flavors, proved invaluable in optimizing their fertilizer mixes. Even Inspector Flavorband's nephew, a gangly teenager named Basil, the irony was not lost on anyone, found his way to their underground Eden. His inside knowledge of Nutri-Police protocols was as useful as it was amusing. But as their operation grew, so did the risks. More than once they had close calls with patrol drones or curious maintenance workers. Each time they escaped discovery by the skin of their teeth, and once, memorably, by Whiskers starting a small riot among a colony of sewer rats, providing a perfect distraction. It was after one such close call that Ariel called a meeting of their core group. As they gathered around a makeshift table, a repurposed solar panel balanced on two empty Nutri-barrels, the mood was tense. "We're making progress," Ariel began, her voice a mix of pride and concern, "but we're also attracting attention. MegaCorpo's not stupid. They're going to notice something's up sooner or later." Max nodded grimly. "I've seen reports of nutritional anomalies cropping up more frequently. They're starting to investigate." Dr. Zephyr sighed, absently petting Whiskers, who had claimed his lap as a throne. "Perhaps we've been too ambitious. We could scale back, focus on just maintaining what we have." "No," Luna exclaimed, slamming her hand on the table with enough force to make the solar panel wobble alarmingly. "We can't give up now. Do you know what Pixel told me yesterday? She actually dreamed about carrots. Real crunchy orange carrots. When was the last time anyone in this city dreamed about real food instead of Nutri-Cubes?" A moment of silence followed Luna's impassioned outburst, broken only by Whisker's contented purring. Finally, Ariel spoke, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Luna's right. We can't stop now. But we do need to be smarter about this." She turned to Max. "You said MegaCorpo's investigating nutritional anomalies. What exactly are they looking for?" Max furrowed his brow. "Mostly unexplained spikes in vitamin levels, trace minerals that shouldn't be in the city's waste system, that sort of thing." Ariel's eyes gleamed with the light of a woman who just had a brilliantly terrible idea. "So what if we give them nutritional anomalies? But not the ones they're expecting." Dr. Zephyr caught on quickly, his eyes widening. "You mean?" "Exactly," Ariel nodded. "We flood the system with so many weird nutritional signals that they won't know where to look. We'll be hiding our real operation in plain sight." Luna bounced in her seat. "Ooh, like creating a bunch of fake crop circles to hide the real alien landing site." Everyone turned to stare at her. "What?" she said defensively. "I watch a lot of old conspiracy theory videos. They're hilarious." Max shook his head, but he was smiling. "It's crazy, but it just might work. I can tweak some of the Nutri-dispensers to release harmless but unusual vitamin combinations. It'll keep the investigators running in circles. And I, Dr. Zephyr added, can concoct some interesting but benign mineral mixtures to introduce into the waste system. Nothing harmful, of course, but certainly puzzling to any overzealous nutritional investigators. Ariel nodded, feeling a surge of hope. Good. And while they're chasing shadows, we'll keep growing. Not just vegetables, but a revolution. As the group continued to plan, their voices filled with renewed determination. Whiskers stretched lazily and turned his gaze to a small sprout that had pushed its way through a crack in the concrete floor. The cat's eyes seemed to hold a wisdom beyond his species as he watched the tiny plant reach for the artificial sunlight. In that moment, in a forgotten tunnel beneath a city that had forgotten the taste of real food, the seeds of rebellion were taking root. And like the stubborn sprout defying the concrete around it, this small group of misfits was determined to break through the artificial world above and bring life, colour, and flavour back to New Neo York. Little did they know, their greatest challenge was yet to come. But for now, they had hope, they had each other, and most importantly, they had a bunch of really delicious snacks to fuel their revolutionary fervour. Chapter 7. Operation Sprout Storm. The New Neo York Underground had never been so lively, or so delicious. What had started as Ariel's small act of rebellion had blossomed into a full-fledged movement. The abandoned subway tunnels now hummed with the quiet industry of secret farms, each one a tiny oasis of life in the sterile world above. But as any gardener knows, the more a plant grows, the harder it becomes to hide. It was Luna who first noticed something was amiss. She burst into their main cavern one day, her eyes wide with excitement and fear in equal measure. "Guys, you won't believe what I just saw on the MegaNet." Max looked up from where he was tinkering with a homemade hydroponic system, his face smeared with what everyone hoped was just mud. "Please tell me it's not another NutriCube unboxing video. I still have nightmares about the last one." Luna shook her head vigorously. "No, it's way bigger than that. Someone started a viral challenge. They're calling it the Real Food Revolution." Ariel's hand froze midway through pruning a particularly ambitious tomato plant. "What exactly does this challenge involve?" "People are daring each other to find and eat real food," Luna exclaimed. "They're posting videos of themselves crunching into apples, slicing tomatoes, even chewing on raw herbs." Dr. Zephyr stroked his beard thoughtfully, dislodging a small caterpillar that had made its home there. "Fascinating. It seems our little revolution has taken on a life of its own." Whiskers, sensing the tension in the room, decided this was the perfect moment to knock over a tray of seedlings, because that's what cats do in times of crisis. As Ariel rushed to salvage the fallen plants, she felt a mix of pride and panic. "This is exactly what we wanted," she said, gently replanting a baby lettuce. "But it's happening too fast. We're not ready for this kind of attention." Max nodded grimly. "MegaCorpo's going to crack down hard. They can't afford to let this trend continue." As if on cue, the ancient television set they'd rigged to receive broadcasts from the surface flickered to life. The stern face of MegaCorpo's CEO, a woman who looked like she subsisted entirely on spreadsheets and the tears of middle management, filled the screen. "Citizens of New Neo York," she began, her voice as synthetic as the food she peddled. "It has come to our attention that a dangerous and illegal trend is spreading through our fair city. The consumption of so-called real food is not only a violation of nutritional law, but a threat to the very fabric of our society." Luna couldn't help but snort. "The only fabric in our society is the weird stretchy stuff they make Nutri-suits out of," the CEO continued. her eyes seeming to bore into each of them. "We are implementing immediate measures to combat this threat. All citizens are required to report any suspicious agricultural activity. Remember, if you see something green, say something." The broadcast ended, leaving the cavern in stunned silence. It was Whiskers who broke the tension, choosing that moment to proudly deposit a half-eaten leaf at Ariel's feet, looking entirely too pleased with himself. Ariel looked down at the mangled plant matter, then back up at her friends. Her eyes held a steely determination that would have made even the most robust GMO crop quiver. "Well," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face, "I think it's time we kicked things up a notch." Dr. Zephyr raised an eyebrow. "What exactly did you have in mind?" "They want to see green?" Ariel's grin turned mischievous. "Let's give them more green than they can handle. It's time for Operation Sprout Storm." Over the next few hours, the cavern transformed into a war room. Well, a war room with significantly more compost and the occasional interruption from a curious earthworm. Plans were drawn, schemes were hatched, and more than one bad plant pun was made, mostly by Luna, much to everyone's groaning delight. The plan was audacious, borderline insane, and exactly the kind of thing that might just work in a world that had forgotten the taste of rebellion almost as thoroughly as it had forgotten the taste of a ripe strawberry. They would use MegaCorpo's own systems against them. Max's hacking skills would come into play, infiltrating the city's automated gardening drones, relics from a time when the city still maintained ornamental plants. These drones, long dormant, would be their allies in green guerrilla warfare. Luna and Pixel got to work creating a special blend of seeds, fast-growing hardy plants that could thrive in the harsh urban environment. "We're basically making the plant equivalent of a superhero team," Luna declared, mixing seeds with the intensity of an alchemist on a deadline. Dr. Zephyr and Herb combined their knowledge to create a growth accelerator that would make Jack's beanstalk look like an underachiever. "It's perfectly safe," Dr. Zephyr assured everyone, even as his eyebrows continued to smolder slightly from the last experiment. "And Ariel?" Ariel coordinated it all, her eyes shining with the light of someone who could see a forest where others saw only concrete. As the final preparations were made, Ariel gathered everyone for one last pep talk. "What we're about to do is dangerous," she said, looking each of them in the eye. "If we're caught, it's not just a slap on the wrist and a NutriCube re-education seminar. This is serious." Luna raised her hand. "Question. On a scale of oops, I mixed up salt and sugar to I just invented a sentient eggplant, how serious are we talking?" "We're somewhere around I just challenged MegaCorpo to a food fight and I'm armed with tomatoes," Ariel replied dryly. A moment of silence fell over the group as the weight of what they were about to do sank in. Then, to everyone's surprise, it was Whiskers who broke the tension. The cat sauntered into the middle of their circle, sat down, and began meticulously grooming himself as if to say, "Well, are we doing this or not?" Ariel couldn't help but laugh. "All right, team, let's go make New Neo York green again." And so, under the cover of night, or what passed for night in a city that never truly got dark, Operation Sprout Storm was launched. Hacked drones zipped through the city, depositing seeds in every nook and cranny. Rooftops, abandoned lots, even the cracks in sidewalks, nowhere was safe from their botanical blitzkrieg. The next morning, New Neo York awoke to a city transformed. Vines crept up the sides of skyscrapers. Flowers burst through cracks in the pavement. Trees, actual trees, stood proudly in parks that had been nothing but synthetic turf for generations. It was chaos. Beautiful, green, living chaos. MegaCorpo's response was swift and panicked. Nutripolice swarmed the streets, armed with weed whackers and looking utterly bewildered. The CEO appeared on every screen in the city, her carefully composed facade cracking as she urged citizens to remain calm and resist the lure of unauthorized chlorophyll. But it was too late. The seeds of rebellion had quite literally taken root. As Ariel and her team watched the chaos unfold from their underground haven, they knew this was only the beginning. The real battle was just starting. But for the first time in longer than anyone could remember, the air in New York smelled of growth, of life, and just a hint of revolution. Luna summed it up best as she bit into a fresh, juicy apple, grinning from ear to ear. Well, folks, I think we can officially say that the salad days are here again. Whiskers, curled up on a pile of seed catalogues, simply purred in agreement. After all, every good revolution needs a nap now and then. Chapter 8. The Green Rebellion Fallout. The morning after Operation Sproutstorm, New York looked less like a sterile metropolis and more like a jungle that had swallowed a city. Vines embraced skyscrapers like long-lost friends. Flowers peeked out of every crack in the pavement, and trees stood tall and proud in places that hadn't seen so much as a blade of grass in generations. In their underground hideout, Ariel and her band of rebels watched the chaos unfold on their jerry-rigged view screens, a mix of elation and trepidation on their faces. "We did it," Luna breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "We actually did it." Max nodded, his fingers flying over a keyboard as he monitored the city's systems. "MegaCorpo's in full panic mode. Their Nutri-Police are trying to mow down the plants, but they're growing faster than they can cut." Dr. Zephyr chuckled, stroking his beard, which had sprouted a few seedlings of its own overnight. "I may have overdone it a bit with that growth accelerator." Ariel, however, wasn't celebrating yet, her brow furrowed as she watched the scenes of beautiful chaos. "This is just the beginning," she said softly. "MegaCorpo won't take this lying down." As if on cue, every screen in the hideout flickered, the image of New York's green transformation replaced by the stern face of MegaCorpo's CEO. Her usually impeccable appearance was notably disheveled, a leaf stuck in her hair giving her a somewhat comical appearance. "Citizens of New York," she began, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. "What we are witnessing is nothing short of eco-terrorism. This blatant attack on our way of life will not stand." Luna couldn't help but snort. "Eco-terrorism? More like eco-awesomeism." The CEO continued, her eyes seeming to bore through the screen. "We have traced these acts of botanical vandalism to a group of misguided individuals who call themselves the underground gourmets. To these criminals, I say this: turn yourselves in now, or face the full force of MegaCorpo's justice." As the broadcast ended, a heavy silence fell over the hideout, broken only by Whiskers knocking over a potted plant with an air of feline nonchalance. Ariel turned to her friends, her face set with determination. "Well, I guess our secret's out. What's our next move?" Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout their underground network. Max's fingers flew across his keyboard, his face paling. "They've found us," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "MegaCorpo's forces are entering the old subway tunnels. They'll be here within the hour." Panic threatened to overtake the group, but Ariel's voice cut through the chaos like a well-sharpened pruning shear. "All right, people, this is not a drill. Operation Seed Scatter is now in effect." They had prepared for this possibility, but hoping it wouldn't be necessary. Now, faced with imminent discovery, they sprang into action with the coordinated efficiency of a well-oiled machine, or, more accurately, a well-composted garden. Luna and Pixel began packing up their rarest seeds and most critical plant specimens. Dr. Zephyr and Herb carefully stored their research and experimental growth formulas. Max worked feverishly to wipe their digital footprint, all while downloading as much incriminating evidence against MegaCorpo as he could. Ariel moved through the chaos like the eye of a storm, directing, encouraging, and occasionally shouting at Whiskers to stop batting at the dangling roots of their hydroponic systems. As the sounds of approaching forces echoed through the tunnels, Ariel gathered her team for one last stand in their underground Eden. "Listen up, everyone," she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "What we've done here, what we've grown, it's bigger than just us now. It's out there, in the city, in the minds and hearts of people who've tasted real food for the first time." Luna nodded vigorously. "Yeah, we're like Johnny Appleseed, except instead of just apples, we've got a whole salad bar going on." Ariel couldn't help but smile. "Exactly. And now it's time for us to scatter, like seeds in the wind. Each of you has a designated safe house. Go there, lay low, and wait for my signal." "But what about you?" Max asked, concern etched on his face. Ariel's eyes gleamed with a mixture of determination and mischief. "Someone needs to stay behind and give our friends from MegaCorpo a proper welcome. Besides," she added, patting the pocket where she kept her most prized heirloom seeds, "every good gardener knows that sometimes you have to prune to promote growth." As the group prepared to split up, each heading to a different exit, there were hugs, tears, and promises to stay safe. Dr. Zephyr pressed a small vial into Ariel's hand. "A little surprise for our MegaCorpo friends," he said with a wink. "Let's just say it'll make their visit here quite memorable." Finally, only Ariel and Whiskers remained in the main cavern. She looked down at the cat, who gazed back with his usual inscrutable expression. "Well, partner," she said, "ready to face the music?" Whiskers responded by stretching languidly and then settling into a patch of sunlight from one of the light pipes, clearly indicating that he had no intention of going anywhere. Ariel couldn't help but laugh. "I'll take that as a yes." As the sounds of approaching forces grew louder, Ariel took one last look around the cavern that had been her home and the birthplace of a revolution. Tomato vines curled around ancient subway signs, herbs sprouted from cracks in the concrete, and the air was thick with the smell of life and growth. She took a deep breath, savoring the scent of soil and green things. Then, with a determined smile, she pulled out Dr. Zephyr's vial and got to work. MegaCorpo was in for a surprise, and Ariel Greenleaf was going to make sure it was one they'd never forget. Chapter 9. Seeds of Change. As the first rays of artificial sunlight began to filter through New York's smog layer, the city held its breath. Overnight, the concrete jungle had transformed into an actual jungle, with vines scaling skyscrapers and flowers bursting through cracks in the sidewalk. It was as if Mother Nature had decided to reclaim her territory, armed with miracle and a vendetta. Deep underground, in the heart of the former subway system, Ariel Greenleaf stood her ground. Surrounded by the fruits and vegetables of her labor, she waited for the inevitable confrontation. Whiskers, ever the stalwart companion, had taken up a strategic position atop a pile of compost, looking for all the world like a furry general surveying his troops. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the tunnels. Ariel took a deep breath, the scent of soil and growing things filling her lungs. "Well, Whiskers," she muttered, "I guess this is it." Whiskers responded with a yawn that seemed to say, "Wake me when it's over, or when it's time for dinner, whichever comes first." Suddenly, the cavern was flooded with light as MegaCorpo forces burst in, led by none other than Inspector Flavorban himself. His mustache quivered with indignation as he took in the scene before him, a veritable Eden tucked away beneath the city streets. "Ariel Greenleaf," he bellowed, his voice echoing off the cavern walls. You are under arrest for agricultural terrorism, flavor disruption, and—" He paused, sniffing the air, making this place smell distressingly non-synthetic. Ariel couldn't help but smile. "Is that all, Inspector? I was hoping to add overthrow of a nutritionally dystopian regime to my resume." Flavorban's face turned an interesting shade of purple, clashing horribly with his Nutri-Police uniform. "This is no joking matter, Ms. Greenleaf. Your little garden party has caused chaos throughout the city. Do you have any idea how many Nutri-drones have short-circuited trying to process actual chlorophyll?" "Oh, I have some idea," Ariel replied, thinking of Max's gleeful reports on the citywide systems breakdown. "But tell me, Inspector, when was the last time you tasted something that didn't come out of a synthesizer?" For a moment, Flavorban's rigid demeanor cracked. A flicker of something, curiosity, longing, passed across his face. "That's irrelevant," he snapped, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Ariel seized the moment. Reaching behind her, she plucked a ripe tomato from a nearby vine. "Here," she said, holding it out to Flavorban. "Just try it. What have you got to lose except maybe a lifetime of bland artificial flavors?" The cavern fell silent. Even Whiskers sat up, watching the scene with feline intensity. Flavorban stared at the tomato as if it might explode at any moment. His hand, almost of its own accord, reached out. And then, in a move that would be replayed on underground resistance videos for years to come, Inspector Flavorban, terror of urban gardeners everywhere, took a bite of a real, honest-to-goodness tomato. His eyes widened. The tomato dropped from his hand, falling to the ground in what seemed like slow motion. And then, to everyone's shock, a tear rolled down his cheek, getting momentarily caught in his magnificent moustache before continuing its journey. I remember," he whispered. "My grandmother's garden, the smell of the earth, the taste of sun-warmed fruit." He looked at Ariel, his eyes shining with a mixture of wonder and regret. What have we done? What have we become? It was at that moment that Dr. Zephyr's little surprise decided to make its grand entrance. The cavern was suddenly filled with a burst of colourful spores, transforming the serious MegaCorpo forces into a tableau that looked like a rainbow had sneezed on them. Amid the chaos of coughing, sneezing, and general colourful confusion, Ariel's voice rang out clear and strong. "This is what we're fighting for, Inspector. Not just food, but life. Colour. Flavour. All the things MegaCorpo has stripped away in the name of efficiency and control." As if on cue, the view screens throughout the cavern flickered to life. But instead of the stern face of MegaCorpo's CEO, they showed scenes from across the city. People were in the streets, marveling at the plants that had sprung up overnight. Children were touching real grass for the first time, their laughter ringing out in parks that had been silent for generations. And there, in the heart of MegaCorpo headquarters, was Max, surrounded by a group of wide-eyed employees. He was holding up a laptop, streaming live footage of the underground farm. "This is what they've been hiding from us," his voice rang out. "This is what we've been missing." The screen switched to Luna and Pixel, who had apparently taken over a NutriCube factory. Luna was gleefully showing workers how to repurpose the machinery to process real vegetables. "Who wants to learn how to make actual pickle-flavoured things that aren't just chemicals pretending to be pickles?" she called out, to a surprisingly enthusiastic response. Across the city, the seeds of rebellion that Ariel and her team had planted were bearing fruit, quite literally, in many cases. Flavorban looked from the screens to Ariel, his worldview visibly crumbling. I don't understand. Why aren't people rioting? Where's the chaos we predicted?" Ariel smiled gently. "Turns out, Inspector, when you give people a taste of something real, something alive, they hunger for more. Not chaos, but growth. Change." As if to punctuate her point, a small sprout pushed its way through the concrete at Flavorban's feet. He stared at it, transfixed. "So," Ariel said, holding out her hand, "what do you say, Inspector? Ready to turn over a new leaf?" For a moment, the cavern held its breath. Even Whiskers seemed to be waiting in anticipation, his tail twitching slightly. Then, slowly, Inspector Flavaban reached out and shook Ariel's hand. "I think," he said, his moustache quivering with emotion, "it's time I remembered how to garden." And just like that, the revolution was won. Not with violence or force, but with a tomato, a cloud of colourful spores, and the unstoppable power of people reconnecting with the earth. In the days that followed, New Neo York transformed. MegaCorpo, faced with overwhelming public demand, and more than a few executives who had tasted real food and promptly resigned, announced a bold new initiative in agricultural urban renewal. Rooftop gardens sprang up across the city. The abandoned subway tunnels became underground farms, supplying fresh produce to every neighborhood. Ariel and her team emerged as heroes, though they insisted they were just gardeners who got a bit carried away. Luna started a cooking show, teaching people how to prepare vegetables that didn't come in cube form. Max used his tech skills to develop sustainable urban farming systems. Dr. Zephyr and Herb opened a research center dedicated to rediscovering lost plant species. And Whiskers? Well, Whiskers remained Whiskers, supremely unimpressed by the whole affair and mainly concerned with finding the sunniest spots in the new rooftop gardens for his naps. As for Ariel, she found herself standing in the middle of Central Park, now a thriving food forest. She watched as children chased butterflies, reintroduced along with the plants, and adults marveled at the taste of fresh berries. "You know," said a voice beside her, and she turned to see Inspector Flavaban, his moustache now adorned with a jaunty flower. "I never thought I'd say this, but I think I prefer this kind of flavor enforcement." Ariel laughed, a sound as free and joyous as the city around them had become. "Welcome to the garden party, Inspector. It's only just beginning." And as the sun set on a greener, more flavorful New Neo York, the seeds of change continued to grow, promising a future where the line between city and garden, between progress and nature, was deliciously blurred. After all, as any good gardener knows, with the right care and a bit of rebellion, anything can grow, even hope. Especially hope.